I saw a really interesting video today from a game developer that dives deep into the financials of developing a game. They show the exact amount of money that their game has made, where it all comes from, how it all works, and it was really eye-opening. It feels like oftentimes people treat game development the same way they treat the Bible. They've never read it, yet they pretend to be an expert on it. So I've seen so many times like a game's doing somewhat well on Steam with a lot of downloads and people start spouting about how it's a giant cash grab and they're making millions of dollars like Mr. Krabs off it, this and that, even though they don't know anything about it, but they're cosplaying as the accountant for this indie game. And this game developer had a very successful game, at least in my opinion, in terms of downloads, 750,000 downloads. And hearing that number, I imagine most of you picture this guy's got bags of money. But that's just not the reality of it.
Hey, I'm Alex, and just some background so you understand these stats. This is Paint Warfare. It's a free FPS game with about 750,000 downloads. And in the game, there's microtransactions, so you can buy DLC bundles from $2 to $5 and coins which you can use to buy hats and skins for the guns in-game. The reviews are also super positive.
This is Banana Dev talking about Paint Warfare, a passion project he developed over the course of thousands of hours. He followed a very standard free-to-play model. You know, this is the kind of stuff Ubisoft and EA has wet dreams about. It's just run-of-the-mill, normal, free-to-play microtransactions where it's DLC cosmetics and in-game purchases. He's not trying to reinvent the condom here. It is a tried-and-true method. And with 750,000 downloads while having microtransactions, I imagine most of you assume that this was a home run. He hit it out of the park financially.
So over a total of 4 years of release, the game has made $4,672 gross, and after local taxes like VAT, GST, and also returns, this comes out to $3,812. And then Steam takes a 30% cut, so the total revenue I take home is $2,668 and 40 cents.
$2,680 over the course of 4 years is shockingly low. You would make more money if you sat outside of Walmart collecting loose change that fell out of people's pockets. You could upload a 45-second clip from a Family Guy ha-ha moment on YouTube and probably make more in ad revenue over the course of 4 years than he did over the course of thousands of hours of dev time.
Now, in terms of counting how much work I put into the game, Steam actually tracks the amount of time I spend in the game or developing the game in Unity with Steam Open. So that comes out to 2,512 hours, but this doesn't count the time spent in Unity developing the game before I released on Steam, 3,000 hours of dev time. So in total, this works out to around 42 cents per hour.
42 cents an hour. You could lick the toilet seats clean at a gas station and get paid more than that. It's super sad because he poured thousands of hours into this game. Now, he's looking at it very optimistically about the skill set that he was able to get through this project and also everything he learned from it. So it's not like it's all a big negative experience. In fact, he looks at it with pretty positive perspective, though he does mention this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this is pretty sad. If I spent this time working at McDonald's as minimum wage, which is $24.10 Australian, or around 16 USD per hour, I would be sitting at like 48,000 USD, as opposed to 1,276.
Now, the 1,200 number that he's using here is after he took out his expenses, because it's not like developing the game was free. He had to pay for servers. He also paid for some assets, so he did have expenses. So in total, the take home was $1,200-ish over the course of 4 years. When I was watching this video, it really opened my third eye to the reality of game development for a lot of developers. Of course, I'm not, the biggest Neanderthal in the world. I always understood that not only is game development very hard, but it is very risky, and it is hard to make like a living off it. But I was always under the impression that if your downloads got into like the hundreds of thousands, you were pretty successful. You were going to make money off of that, when that's just not the reality of it at all. And I know I'm definitely guilty of doing the same shit a lot of other people do, where I pretend to understand the intricacies of game development and the financials behind it, sticking my pinky out well, actually, it is extremely greedy of them to be charging $2 for this Hatsune Miku underwear package when clearly they're generating millions of dollars per day with their fart tokens. When the Ruby Tuesday truth of it all is, I've never opened Unreal Engine, I've never poked around in Unity, I've never released a game. How the fuck would I know? I don't have like an actual educated perspective on it. It'd be like asking my dad his perspective on the new One Piece manga chapter. But now, after seeing it from Banana Dev, it starts to paint a pretty clear picture of just how difficult it is to make a sustainable living from game development as like an indie dev, and also why so many studios take the safest, most generic, formulaic games and push them forward because they know there is a built-in audience for it. For example, Ubisoft open worlds. I am beyond exhausted of them. I know a lot of people are, but there's a lot of people who aren't, who don't mind getting fed the same vegetables over and over again. It's something that's comforting and something that's familiar to them, so they will keep playing and buying the open world Ubisoft adventures, or really lack thereof an adventure. And while I think everyone always understood why there's such an emphasis on microtransactions being shoved up the butthole of every game that comes out, I do think this shows just how important that is, which is why they come up with schemes to get more people enticed into purchasing, such as putting things behind a paywall or making a grind for earning in-game currency a fucking grind where it has to be like a full-time job to accumulate enough of the currency to make that purchase without paying real money for it. It's all designed to get you to spend money on it because the game is free and they need to make something back on it. And I always assumed this worked extremely well for pretty much any game. If there's a lot of downloads and there's micros, in my noodle, I always just connected dots that, oh, there's definitely going to be a sizable chunk of people buying those microtransactions. But after seeing it here, with 750,000 downloads and $2,600, it's clear that is just not always the case.
Now, let's break this down. So the game was pay to play in the first year of release. It was around $5, excluding sales. So during its pay to play stage, it sold $594, and now it's free to play, and it's making about 1,166 USD after all the cuts and fees per year.
So the game wasn't always free to play. It started as a pay to play game with like a $5 cost, which he then dropped to, I think it was $4, and then eventually free. And it looked like, judging by the graph, that took place over the course of like almost a year, a little less than a year, and he made about $600 from that. So going free to play, he did make more money from the DLC sales, but the chess master Charles can't help but wonder, if he had kept it at like a $3 price tag for this game, would he have ended up making more money in the long term and less downloads? Because the downloads didn't translate to, oodles of cash or anything. Would it have been more financially viable to keep this as a pay-to-play game and instead just try and make more people aware of its existence, as opposed to trying to get it to foster a community through a large number of downloads by being free-to-play and hoping that they spend money on the skins? Clearly, I don't know the answer to that. I do know, though, that a lot of gamers treat the words free-to-play like poison. Like, they do not like it because it reminds them of very greedy corporations that exploit the model. So there's a lot of times where something being free-to-play can actually be somewhat of a detriment to it. But I do think it's become so commonplace that you would expect it from a multiplayer game. Take, for example, Concord, God rest its soul. It's already in the grave in less than 2 weeks. That was a $40 game that should have been free to play because all of the competitors are. However, in this case, I don't know exactly what Paint Warfare competes with. Would it have been better financially for Banana Dev to keep a price tag on it? I don't know, but probably not. I feel like the long-term benefits of having a game with 750,000 downloads outweigh the short-term gains of having more money come in from people curiously purchasing it and maybe not engaging with it. I think building that community is better long-term for his upcoming projects as opposed to, maybe he made a few extra $1,000s by keeping a price tag on it over the course of those years.
But working on Paint Warfare, despite not making a lot of money, has given me a crap ton of knowledge on what to do and what not to do when publishing games, and it's opened so many doors. With a large game like this under my belt, I can land pretty much any freelancing gig I want due to my experience and efficiency of dev. I've also had the opportunity to work for YouTubers like Blackthorn Prod, making a course for him. And I also got the privilege of taking part in some really cool challenges on YouTube due to my track record. So there definitely are a lot of indirect benefits.
It seems Banana Dev would agree as well. Like I said, he has a good perspective on all of it. This is an incredible achievement to have a game with 750,000 downloads. Also, it seems most people really like the game, so that's huge.
The assets, codebase, and experience on how to do stuff faster and how to not market can be taken into future projects. And I'm really hoping for the next game I work on, it'll be a lot more financially successful so I can make this into a career.
He then goes on to say that the advice he would give to someone that's aspiring to do game development is to not make a free-to-play game because they're very hard to monetize. He then goes into a deeper, in-depth breakdown on like the demographics of the game, like who was downloading it, where, as well as like what location was spending the most and what was spending, this portion of the revenue versus that. It's all very insightful. So I highly recommend checking out his full video on it. I just wanted to talk about this a little bit because it's a very rare peek behind the curtain of what game development looks like outside of like a major studio. This is a solo developer tackling a big project over the course of years and thousands of hours of work. And what does that look like in terms of money? And it's not a lot, at least not in this case. And I imagine this is the story for a lot of game developers out there that are putting their heart and soul into their work, publishing it on Steam, and seeing if they can turn that passion into a career. It is really difficult, and this only showed just how hard it is. Even if you find a lot of success with downloads, that doesn't necessarily translate to a lot of success financially. And game development is a labor-intensive, expensive endeavor that takes a long time. So you do need to be making money off of it, otherwise it's not sustainable. You can't keep doing it, which I think everyone fully understands. 42 cents an hour for that work, that is not viable for most people in the world, for good reason. You can't live off that. And I really appreciate this video from Banana Dev here because it's a super open and honest look at what game development looks like even with a successful title under your belt. Monetizing it is not an easy task. And I personally just would have never guessed it would look like this on the back end. I always just assume the most important thing to the financial success of a product, like on Steam, is how many downloads it had. But there's definitely a lot more to it that I now recognize thanks to that video. So again, I highly recommend you check out Banana Dev's full video on it for a more in-depth breakdown. But I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because I found it super interesting. That's really about it. See ya.